And welcome once again to the Monday Night Gun Channel show called the Lock and Load Show, broadcasting on gun channels from the Big Island across the interwebs. You've got an incredibly great panel once again. Squib from Michigan and Patrick from Texas, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Remember the Alamo. All right. And as I'm broadcasting here, I've got this little screen share loop going on because we've got a Category 4 hurricane inbound to the Big Island. And, you know, first of all, you wake up every day and it's just dreary, gray, overcast skies just from the volcano. And now on top of that, you can't tell whether it's like rain clouds or just fog or whatever. Now we got Cat 4 coming in. So
could the hurricane possibly put out the volcano?
No. It's the volcano. How the volcano works is that one of the plates, the Earth's plates, is moving over a magma hotspot, and it keeps going. And basically, the magma pool underground under the Earth's core plate is basically stays in one place, but the plate moves a little bit each year, and it moves. So the effect is that the volcanic activity moves south. So it's moving away from the northern part of the island down to like a new underwater island called Loihi. It'll take another 100,000 years before it reaches sea level, but Mauna Loa is like bigger than Everest if you measure it from the bottom of the seafloor, but from the top, from sea level, it's about 13,000 feet. And Kilauea is only about 4,500 feet. What's interesting about this is when it's like we have this thing around the Pacific, not in Hawaii, called the Ring of Fire, and it's about the one place that might get wiped out by an earthquake is Tokyo, actually, because it's right at the on the edge of the Ring of Fire, where basically the Pacific Plate and the what's the other plate? There's two of them. Wait, there's three of them actually. The North Asian Plate and one other plate. It's like they're all on Tokyo. They're all like Tokyo's sitting on all of them, and basically the plates just go down into like these trenches in the ocean. And what happened about 100,000 years ago is, if you go to Maui, you'll see that you do some geology, you'll find like coral up on top of the mountains. And the way that it got there is by a trench, one of the trenches where these two plates just crash into each other, caused a gigantic tsunami, and it was literally about a third of a mile high. And so it deposited a bunch of coral up on top of the mountain, and that's how it got there, was from about a third of a mile high tsunami that washed up all that threw up all a lot of coral from the ocean bottom onto the top of the mountain. So about every 100,000 years, there's one of these kind of about a third of a mile high tsunamis. So probably, I don't think if that actually hit Kona, I would survive it. So, because I'm still too close to but if it's basically it's about 4,500 feet high, that tsunami, a third of a mile. So it would if the tsunami covered Kilauea completely, it wouldn't drown out the volcano, because the volcano is not it's not the caldera, it's the magma pool underneath the plate, which goes down to the center of the Earth. And if I don't know if anybody's been watching any of the Nat Geo stuff. They've got Yellowstone Live on, and that's the Yellowstone supervolcano. That's a 30-mile wide caldera for Yellowstone supervolcano. 30-mile caldera. I mean, I've walked around the Kilauea caldera. that ain't nothing. But the difference between the Kilauea caldera and the more dangerous calderas, even though this one is kind of active right now, is that this is a shield volcano. And the dangerous ones are cone volcanoes. And basically the shield volcanoes are flat, and it's like slow, steady lava, which is what it's been erupting for 35 years, but it's like steady. But it's just, it's not going to like explode like the more like Mount St. Helens. That's another cone-shaped volcano, or Krakatoa, or Montserrat, Manitoba. Yeah, I'm not a volcano expert, even though I live on a volcano, and the name of my channel is Hawaii Volcano Squad. But it's a different kind of volcano here. The dangerous ones are the tall conic ones. So you can't extinguish, no matter how much water you pour on a volcano, you're not going to extinguish the mantle of the earth. Is the problem. So you can't just throw water on it and expect it to go away. But anyway, so all right. So there's the hurricane. I hit Walmart today to refill my meds and pick up a little extra food and donuts and a few things for the just to be ready. I've got my water distiller going 24/7. Anyway, so hey everybody, before we get into like the basically pick the topic for today was Hiroshima and the bomb, but and World War II. But before we get into that, because just by virtue of this being the day that they dropped the bomb in 1945. But we wanted to have a little fun topic before we got into anything too serious and heavy. So I wanted to ask everybody that's on the chat what their top 3 favorite Western movies are. And so I'm going to ask Patrick first because I know what Squib's answers are already.
I like Tombstone.
Tombstone, the one, is that the one with
that's the one with Kurt Russell in it.
Val Kilmer. Yeah, okay.
Yep. Also like The Alamo with John Wayne.
He made that movie. That he produced that movie.
Yep. And then
okay.
You know, I mean, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Oh goodness, Unforgiven's a good one, but I mean, I haven't seen it as much as I've seen Outlaw Josie Wales.
Well, I know you only get to pick 3 though. So which one, The Unforgiven or the Outlaw Josie Wales?
We'll go Outlaw Josie Wales.
You're going with Outlaw Josie Wales, The Alamo, and the first one was Tombstone. Okay, what you like about Tombstone?
I just like that it was more. I mean, it had a little, I guess, Hollywood flair to the story. It was just, I guess, the right amount of. I mean, they did it right, even though the story wasn't true. You know exactly how it happened and everything. Just how it all rolled together. And the actors did the job. I mean, to me, it was like that's what I would expect Doc Holliday to be like.
Val Kilmer? Okay.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, that's the way I would think he would be like, but I've heard and read that he's not like that at all. And my great grandfather, yeah, I think that's right. He was a U.S. Marshal, and he actually worked with Wyatt Earp in Dodge City at one point. So it's pretty interesting to, kind of see some of his stories and know that I had a family member that worked with the man. So,
well, John Wayne worked with the man. I mean, I think he I mean, because John Wayne started his career by just moving props around during on the set at 20th Century Fox, and he hung out at the commissary where he met Wyatt Earp. The commissary is like the kitchen area, the dining area for everybody goes and has lunch at when they don't go out to charge out to a restaurant and put it on the company's expense account. But all right, so and then the Alamo, what you like about that one other than that you're from Texas?
Well, I was born in Oklahoma, so
Right, but you live in Texas.
but I live in Texas. Yeah. No, the Alamo is just a good story. I've always, I mean, even before we moved here, it was one of my dad's favorite films. He watched it all the time. I like John Wayne's character of Davy Crockett playing that. Then Will Travis, the guy who played that role, was good. Jim Bowie, I mean, it just
Richard Widmark and the Knot Gun.
and the struggle of people, of wanting to be free, and and I know Santa Anna really didn't give too much for being an honorable man, but it did show that there was some honor still left when he said, "Hey, I did not know women and children were in there. They are allowed to leave. You have 1 hour to get them ready to leave, and they won't be bothered." But
One of the more realistic parts of that film that I thought was when they're right before the last battle, and everybody's just contemplating mortality, and somebody asked John Wayne's character, Davy Crockett, well, what are you thinking about? And John Wayne says, I'm not thinking. I'm remembering. That was a very accurate kind of a thing that someone would do in that situation.
yeah.
And so The Outlaw Josie Wales, you said, for your third one. Why'd you like that? What'd you like about that one?
Just the whole, guy trying to, restart his life after the war's ended, and he can't. He's got to get away from it all, and then was it that? Yeah, that's Pale Rider when they killed his family. But it's just a good movie. I mean, I like the story and everything about it, especially when he meets Tin Bears and everything, and he says, I'm trying to say, two men can live together without butchering each other. And just the whole speech of white man and the red man. I mean, just the conversation they had is like, now that's how people really need to, work in the world and live with each other and do things.
Yeah, with governments, you don't get a fair fight or a fair shake.
Right, yeah.
I'm here to give you either one or get either one from you.
And I kind of wish world leaders would say the same thing to each other, kind of like, hey, watch that scene and think about it, because that's the way freaking life needs to be between countries and people and religions. And
I think the way it really works is that when the old man can't settle it on the diplomatic by talking it out, then they send in the young kids to fight it out and settle it on the battlefield instead, and that's the crying shame. But all right, so Squib, tell us what your three favorite westerns are.
Well, since Patrick took The Outlaw Josie Wales,
I can change it to Blazing Saddles.
It's too late. All right, so let's see. No, I'll make three choices. I'll go with The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, Cavalry Charge, and Young Guns.
I'm not familiar with Cavalry Charge.
It used to be called The Last Outpost when they changed the name of the movie.
Okay. I vaguely remember The Last Outpost. Cavalry Charge, I'm not sure. Who was in it?
President Reagan.
Okay. So, were there any actors in it? All right.
He was an actor.
Yeah, I know. All right. So, is there anything? So why did you pick all these three movies?
Just to be randomly random, but I mean, Cavalry Charge is a black and white film. The way it was shot, it's back when they actually filmed movies instead of all this garbage they do today. So I mean, they had to use real horses and real extras and build a set that maybe it was fake right behind it, but at least it wasn't CGI. I'm a big fan of Ronald Reagan, not necessarily as an actor, but as president. So why not? It was two brothers that were on opposite sides of the Civil War, and that makes an interesting story. And the way they want to fight each other because they're on opposite sides, but they also try to cover for each other because they're brothers. Then the other part of the story is they're both pining away over the same woman or something. And then as far as the good, the bad, the ugly, it's a classic. And there's a guy I'm subscribed to, Dustin Weiniger, and he does a lot of reviews of black powder firearms and does a lot of stuff with a group called the Arizona Ghost Riders that do like cowboy type reenactments and stuff. So he was recently he's done some videos about movie mistakes with guns, and somebody had asked him to bring up the movie mistakes with the good, the bad, the ugly, and he said, "Well, to tell you the truth, I've never seen it." And I'm like, "What? How can you do Western reenactments where it's more important?" Not necessarily be historically accurate, but to reenact like you're somebody in the movies, even though they kind of do a little bit of both. They do the historical stuff and the theatrical stuff, and not seen it. So he says he's going to see it and maybe he'll review it. But it's like a benchmark for Western films. I mean, because it's so long and it's got the musical score and it's different. It's way different.
Well, you have
and it is based on an actual battle that took place, I think, in New Mexico.
Well, it's three characters who are just really great actors. For starters, you have Lee Van Cleef as the bad guy, Angel Eyes, and you've got Eli Wallach as he just fills up the screen as Tuco Benedicto Pacifico, also known as the Rat. He plays an incredible bad guy, and Clint Eastwood. That was the last of the trilogy from the trilogy. A whole trilogy was Fistful of Dollars.
The Man with No Name.
More. Yeah, the Man with No Name
trilogy. Yep.
Or although in the first one they called him Joe, the Gravedigger called him Joe, and the second one he was Manco, but it was mostly the Man with No Name. And I think I saw an interview with Clint Eastwood about that, and he said the best part he liked about working with Sergio Leone was going to Italy because these were all called spaghetti westerns because they were Italian production companies. Sergio Leone was Italian and mostly Italian cast and crew. And so they had to dub most of it into English. I mean, Clint Eastwood spoke English, but a lot of the other people spoke Italian. But it was just the characters were so good. But Clint Eastwood liked about it is that he could basically do what he wanted because he said Sergio Leone didn't speak much English and Clint Eastwood didn't speak much Italian, so he pretty much could do what he wanted because they didn't have any way to talk to each other. So I thought that was pretty hilarious because I've never seen a director who wouldn't talk to his talent and give them direction because that's what directors do. But anyway, so I have three different movies that I picked, and I hope people remember them or something. The first one is stars Henry Fonda and Anthony Perkins. Anthony Perkins you may remember from Psycho, the Alfred Hitchcock movie, but this was called The Tin Star, and Henry Fonda plays a retired sheriff turned bounty hunter, and Anthony Perkins, I don't know if you guys can see the screen share. Anthony Perkins basically plays like a stand-in sheriff because the regular sheriff has been killed by some bad guys, and the town doesn't know who to put in charge. And so they put him in charge, and he basically has no idea how to actually, what being a sheriff involves. And so Henry Fonda's character has to teach him what to do. But nobody likes bounty hunters. So there's a conflict. The conflicts are set up between the town and the bounty hunter because the town doesn't like bounty hunters. Anthony Perkins always wants to bring in the bad guys alive, and it's a really.
Did you say bounty hunters?
Bounty hunter. What's wrong with that?
Man's got to make a living somehow. Dying ain't much of a living, boy.
Well, Henry Fonda's character was good at it. And basically what he said to like some of the bad guys were, you're really not a good shot unless you're sneaking up on some old guy from behind in a carriage. You're just not a very good shot. But he gives them advice on how to handle a mob in town who want to string it. When they finally catch the killers, there's a lynch mob wants to string them up, and he basically tells them to go up to the leader of the leader of the mob, and he basically says, if you just walk right up to him until you're about 2 feet away, because if you're 2 feet away from him, he's going to know that if there's a gunfight, he's going to get hurt really bad. So, and just tell him he's under arrest, and if his hands go up, you've got a prisoner, and if his hands go down, either you kill him or he kills you. And so it's just a great story of why you wouldn't want to be a sheriff. and it's a experienced person passing on knowledge to an idealistic person who doesn't know what they're doing, and it's just an incredibly good story. And Henry Fonda's a great actor, and it's just a great, very well done. Okay, the Tin Star. Next one. Is the black and white. This one was in black and white, although this poster's in color, the Tin Star, if I remember correctly. Unless they colorized it, I can't recall. VistaVision, that may have been in color then. My bad. This one was in black and white. The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. This has starred Lee Marvin here as Liberty Valance. I forget which territory that was. But it was a territory, not a state. And this was the classic ranchers versus settlers. And the other actors in this are John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart. Jimmy Stewart plays a lawyer who's come out west, and on his way to his way out west, his carriage is. What do they say? Robbed to go. You don't say stage jacked, hijacked. It's stuck. It's a stick up. They stick up the carriage, and he beats up Jimmy Stewart's character. And John Wayne is just a small rancher in this town, and Jimmy Stewart's brought in barely alive, and there's the conflict is between basically Jimmy Stewart, John Wayne, and Lee Marvin's character as Liberty Valance, and here's the bad guy. And I don't want to spoil the plot, but it's a great story. It just incredible. One of the best scenes I liked in this was the showdown at Pete's place, which is the eating house. And there's a scene where Jimmy Stewart's character, and he was a veteran, and I think he was in the Air Corps, and he's filling in, serving at this eating place, an eating establishment, just bringing out the plates, people's dinner to him, and basically everybody in town knows that Lee Marvin's character, Liberty Valance, has robbed the stage and killed some settlers, some ranchers around, but the local sheriff really can't do anything because he doesn't have any jurisdiction outside of the town, and the local sheriff couldn't possibly do anything anyway. It's just not within his capability to take on a rough and tough bad guy like this. And so anyway, he trips Jimmy Stewart's character. John Wayne's stake falls on the ground. He's trying to bring him a stake. And John Wayne has a little showdown with Liberty Valance. And it's how you do it. Basically, John Wayne says, pick up the stake. And Lee Marvin says, okay, you heard him. And to Jimmy Stewart, pick up the stake. And John Wayne just takes 2 steps forward and says, no, I mean you, Liberty, you pick it up. And there's just a moment on the screen, and that's how they do it. That's how he did it, because John Wayne wasn't that great of an actor. So it was like Lee Marvin actually thought that John Wayne was going to shoot him or something, because it was like, I mean, I know the guns were loaded, but he was about John Wayne. If you want to see how to threaten somebody, it's when John Wayne says, "You pick up the stake, Liberty." That's exactly how you threaten someone in a showdown. But I think then Jimmy Stewart has a line, but it's just John Wayne versus Lee Marvin. It was. And it's an amazing movie, well directed. And the best Western, in my opinion, ever was The Searchers. And this is another Ford movie, directed, and this had everything that you could possibly want to have in a Western, and including great cinematography, like this picture. Everything in here is like some movies, the cinematography, which is the photography, is so great that you could just if you buy the DVD, you could just hit pause, and any picture would just any freeze frame would stand alone as a great picture all by itself. And in this scene, he's kind of doing an homage to Paul Fix, who was an actor, another Western actor, but. What this movie has is racial hatred, murder, bigotry. It's got and hatred, and it's about somebody who just won't quit. And it's in Texas, and it doesn't go too deep into the history. But it runs through it. And so this has Ward Bond, John Wayne, Natalie Wood in a small role. They have to rescue her from the Nayaki Comanche. Basically, the story is the Comanches are raiding through Texas, killing settlers. And they kill his brother, John Wayne's character's brother, and his family, and they kidnap the 2 little girls to raise as children of their own. And so he goes looking for the kidnapped children, and it takes him years to find them. And it's got everything that you could want in a Western. And it's got, I mean, the motivations of the characters are just really intense, like, and primal, and but it's also classy in its own way. And but it's also debasing in a way, and it leaves out some things about history, but it has it all in there if you know about it, and it's just incredible Western cinema, just the photography, there isn't any flaws in this film. Pretty much, I couldn't find one, and so I had some other movies I would have picked if there was more than three, but for the top three, I think this covers it. And the two of them are John Wayne films, and the other one was Henry Fonda. And but if you never see a movie, a Western, and you've never seen one in your life, watch The Searchers. He plays he wants to. You don't know what John Wayne is going to do at the end of this film, because he hates Comanches so much. He wants to kill everything, and he goes insane. And Jeffrey Hunter's character is there to try and save his he's kind of an adopted. He was kind of adopted by this family, and he's not actually related to the sister, but he grew up with and so he feels obligated, and he just wants to be there to make sure John Wayne doesn't go insane and kill her too, because she's been with Comanche bucks, because she was raised from a child as a captive prisoner. So, it's just so you've got. And if you know the history of the West, it's even worse, because, I mean, the war with the Comanches and with Texans started when the Texans killed a bunch of Comanche chiefs at a peace conference called the Council House Massacre, when basically they were trying to negotiate a peace treaty with some of the Comanche tribes or divisions, and they found out that the person negotiating had found out in the middle of the meeting at the council house that some Comanches had a white girl captive. It wasn't any of the Comanche chiefs or any of the people that were at the peace negotiations, but basically. The soldiers surrounded the courthouse and said, nobody leaves until we get this girl back. And these chiefs didn't know they didn't know anything about this girl that was kidnapped, this white girl captive who was kidnapped by some other Comanche division. It's like if Yankee Marshall kidnapped one of Squibb's children, and you want to go kill somebody else on gun channels because of it. It's like, it makes no sense, but it didn't matter. They surrounded the place, and they wouldn't let the chiefs leave, and the Comanches felt cornered, so they tried to make a break for it, and the leaders of all these Comanche tribes were killed, and pretty much at a peace treaty negotiation, right? So that's when all the Comanche divisions, who were usually fighting with each other, said, okay, they just killed like 5 or 6 or 7 different Comanche chiefs at a peace negotiation. And so they all stopped fighting with each other. They stopped fighting with the Kiowa, and they made a treaty with each other to kill every Texan in Texas. And that led to the formation of the Texas Rangers, because the Comanche were raiding through. They had a great raid where they went all the way to the ocean and they killed everybody and they stole cattle. They burned down towns. They did everything. And so when you see this movie and it starts out with a Comanche raid, well, there was a reason that they were doing that. And they weren't necessarily wrong for doing that. But John Wayne's character, he rides back from the Civil War to Texas, and and just a short while after, the Comanches kill his brother and family and kidnap 2 children, and so the plot of the story moves forward. So there's the history of it. That part of it's genuine, but the story isn't really genuine. But that's how it was. The Comanches hated white people, and they had good reason to. And they weren't really on the wrong side, but that's how the West was. So that's what you can get from a movie like this that you won't get from some other movies. And so John Ford had a way of bringing it out in the way he ran the sets and stuff. And it wasn't like he didn't run his films like sets like other people did. And it's just a great movie to watch. It's a long one, but anyway. All right, enough of the Westerns. Let's see if I can find my way back to the show here. My rant on Westerns for the day.
I still think Blazing Saddles is the honorable mention.
Oh, that Mel Brooks. I got in trouble for parking in his parking spot once.
Is he a nice guy or was he mad?
I never got up to him. The security people made me move my car before he even got involved. Parking spots go at a high premium on a film lot. I mean, they don't just give them to anybody. The regular people have to park out in the outside lots. I mean, it's not that far of a walk from the lots, but it's not the same as just being able to park up right by your office. So, and but those days are gone. And the Westerns are people usually don't make Westerns because they usually don't make money no more. So what it goes into them. So when you see a Western like the one you picked, Tombstone, it costs a bit of money to promote the movie after you made it and to make the movie. And I know that on Tombstone they had the whole they built a town, and they try and make, there's actually townspeople and craftspeople, and and to make the town kind of come to life where it's at. And but anyway.
Well, I saw Hostiles. Oh
yeah, you did. I like that one.
Yeah, it was Christian Bale did it, and I thought it was an okay movie. I mean, it's not one I'm going to watch all the time, but I mean, I thought it was a good movie. It was
yeah, it wasn't a classic, but it was a good movie. I mean, it was fun. All right, so I'm gonna see if I can make my way back over to. It's trying to be in 2 places at once on this computer screen here. Oh, there's a lot of text in the dialogue there, and let's see, Patriot in the Dark, Steve D, Enrique Sonora. Oh, Apache with Burt Lancaster and a couple of Reagan flicks. Donovan's Reef, that's another Lee Marvin one. Yeah, well, I think John Wayne was a veteran. Lee Marvin, well, I know Jimmy Stewart was. I didn't know Lee Marvin was buried in Arlington. I mean, I think most people know Lee Marvin from The Dirty Dozen. When it was more
Lee Marvin was a Democrat.
No, John Wayne didn't serve.
I thought he was in the Army or the Marines. Are you sure?
He was in movies about it. I'm pretty sure he never served.
Yeah, and Jimmy's general.
Yeah, Jimmy Stewart served for sure. I thought John Wayne did, but
Jimmy Stewart was a pilot.
Yeah, well, I know he was in bombers, but I don't know if he was a navigator or bombardier or what.
He was a pilot.
He was a pilot.
He was really good in Strategic Air Command.
I remember that movie.
He flew B-52s and B-36s and B-47s. Yeah, he got to fly them all.
So, okay.
John Wayne applied to the U.S. Naval Academy but was not accepted, so instead he went to USC.
U.S. what?
University of Southern California, where you're from.
I went to UCLA, and anyway, USC had a good film school. So I've heard. But anyway, on to our main topic for the show, which was, okay, today is the anniversary of one of the two atomic weapons that led to the end of World War II. And it was I thought you did. I don't recall the chat we had about this a year ago, but you were saying that I somehow had thought it was not justified, but I can't actually believe I would think that. The thing about dropping the bomb was that the war had to be brought to a fast conclusion, because not only were there thousands of Allied prisoners languishing in Japanese POW camps all across the world, if MacArthur had gone through with Operation Downfall and the invasion of Kyushu Island, millions of people would have died. And we're talking at least 1 million U.S. soldiers, and God knows how many millions of Japanese would have died. So in one flash, 80,000 people were killed, with a little boy was dropped on Hiroshima. Some kind of uranium gun, nuclear device, followed by there was a military garrison, I believe, in Hiroshima, and in Nagasaki they dropped the Fat Man, some different device, but another nuclear bomb, atomic bomb, and I think it landed right on the torpedo factory that made the torpedoes that had attacked Pearl Harbor. And so I would just say that World War II in the Pacific theater was Japan's war. My recollection is that the Japanese were out for resources. They had invaded China, and then they had they were going to they basically, the French in Indochina was like, it was now Vietnam, but then it was French Indochina, and the Japanese basically demanded rights to land their airplanes at French air bases in French Indochina, and the French didn't agree to that, so they just invaded instead. And then the U.S. slapped, basically they froze all their assets in the American banking system, so that robbed the Japanese of their ability to buy oil, because they had all their capital was all those deals were done through U.S. banking system. So they froze all their accounts, and so the Japanese had a choice. They could either back down and lose face, or basically, as we talked about once before, you just push all in and put all your chips on the table and say all in, and they went all in. and basically this was their war. War in the Pacific. They wanted that war. They asked for that war, and they started that war. And in the end, they got just exactly what they asked for. I mean, the civilians didn't ask to be bombed. But when some people will, it's like almost revisionist, because some people in Japan will say, well, they were trying to surrender. But the Bushido Code would not let the Japanese military surrender. Even when the emperor ordered them to, there was an attempt to countermand that order. I mean, every island that the Marines fought the Japanese army, the Japanese never surrendered. I mean, maybe they would get, if there was like a garrison of 20,000 troops, maybe there would be like 3 Japanese captured alive or something like that. I mean, it was a brutal war. I mean, and if you invaded the main island and they weren't going to surrender, millions of American soldiers were going to die. And instead, 2 bombs were dropped. And it was more than that. It was the Russians kicking the Japanese army out of Mongolia. Stalin sent the Soviet army, and they just kicked the hell out of what was left of the Japanese army in Mongolia. And finally, between the bombs and getting their asses kicked by the Soviets, they realized that there was no way to win for Japan. They lost the war many battles ago, and it was just the Bushido Code that had kept it going, I think. And they wouldn't surrender in Okinawa. They didn't surrender on Iwo Jima. They didn't surrender on Guadalcanal. They would rather do. I mean, it was their code of honor. I mean, I don't know what. Tell me about what you guys think about the whole no surrender thing. I mean, that was Leonidas. They weren't going to surrender either to the Persians. They would rather die too. So it's not like only an Eastern thing. Greece was the birthplace of democracy in one sense. And so this isn't just an Oriental culture thing. I mean, the Marines aren't very big on having to surrender, but I mean, did Marines surrender at Corregidor or Japan, or was that just the Army? I mean, it's just the... Oh, we've got some, are you aware, somebody who doesn't like Jewish people on here.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't get it, but whatever. I'm kind of like down with the Jews, not just because of you, but you know, all your people are pretty cool. So,
well,
besides, I've told you before, you know, kind of want to be on your side at the end times because you know you're God's chosen people. So,
well,
tight, right?
On the chat that doesn't like Jewish people.
On the external, so.
Man, go kiss my butt.
Yeah, something like that.
I got no problem with Jewish. I got no problem with anybody as long as they don't want to hurt me.
Right. When somebody's religion says kill everybody who's not the same as you, that's where I have a problem. And you know, otherwise I'm pretty good with it. But Hiroshima and Nagasaki were necessary evils. And for the people that want war to be sanitary and all this and politically correct and everything else, that's not what war is. And I understand that it was a different time back then as well. But the fact that those 2 weapons were used saved more than just the lives of the military that would have invaded and all the civilians that would have rose up to fight them. Think about how many lives have been saved since then because nobody's ever wanted to use a nuclear weapon since because they're so awful.
And messy.
Sometimes you can find good in something terrible. If you can't find something good in something terrible, you might want to look at yourself a little bit and ask, what kind of person you are. There's good in everything. There's bad in everything.
Yeah, I mean, I could understand people who think that there's never a good reason to use a nuclear weapon. But it's, I don't know if when it was like when Patton was arguing with Bradley about Sicily and having to do like too many amphibious assaults to get to Messina before Montgomery he did, and basically he tells Jesus, my brain isn't working. General Bradley that it's time to think how many casualties we'd have if we were still crawling on that goddamn road to Messina on the coast road instead of just doing amphibious end runs and getting there, ending the damn thing quickly. So as far as I'll just tell you, if you one thing about like the Israelis, the reason they don't lose battles is because simply they cannot afford to. And if you look at it from a Jewish refugee's point of view, I mean, the Germans were already just throwing civilians into death camps and killing people who couldn't fight back. So if you went to Israel, before anybody could kill you, they would give you a rifle and you got to shoot back. And they literally, their back is right up against the Mediterranean Ocean. They can't afford to lose a battle. That's why they've never lost a battle, because they wouldn't be there if they did. It'd be something else.
Well, it's also displaced anger. It's displaced anger, because if you look at it, the people that are around them are mad because they don't want them there. The only thing is, the British government's the one who set up that nation. Now, they're not the people that are living there now, but the British government owned Palestine, and they gave it to the Jews. And they made the decision to do that before World War I was over. So if anything, all these people that want to kick the Jews out of Israel, all their surrounding neighbors that hate them for some old grudge from thousands of years ago because two brothers parted ways, really need to displace all their anger or put all their anger where it needs to go, which is at the British. And I'm not saying that they should start a war with them. I'm just saying it's displaced anger for one. And the other thing is, there's enough land there for everybody to live in harmony. There's one Jewish country surrounded by a bunch of Muslim countries. Like, they really need that land. They don't. I mean, Israel's tiny, but to live by some of that garbage that's in the Quran, then would be to peacefully coexist. But the people there have perverted the religion, and it's kill everybody who doesn't believe what we believe.
Well,
it's unfortunate.
Not every Muslim is like that. Not everybody that reads the Quran is like that. That's what the terrorists.
Well, too many of them, but HVS, too many of them are. This is something where clean up your own house. Okay, it's like this: if there are more peaceful Muslims than violent Muslims, then why don't the peaceful Muslims do something about it?
I would guess
it's the same thing. It's the same thing with.
I'm guessing because they're afraid as shit.
Well, grow some balls, then. Grow some balls.
I got friends that are Muslim, and I've known one that I've known for over 20 years, and I've asked him that. I've asked his brother that. I said, then why don't you guys who your imam or whatever they call him, he goes, we don't ever talk about this. We don't ever, we don't preach hate or anything like that, or taking people over and butchering them if they don't believe in this. I said, then why don't everybody who believes that in this country stand up and say, screw those idiots that are fruitcakes and nut jobs? Why don't you all stand up in unison and say that? Get on the damn news and do it. And they can't. They can't answer the question.
Well,
I don't know
you
why.
have to look what happened to the people that do. I mean, look what happened to Anwar
Then fight
Sadat.
them back.
Look what
Fight
happened.
them back.
Look what happened to Anwar Sadat. It's
Okay, well, I'm sorry, but cowardice isn't an excuse in my eyes. So sorry.
But I mean, they're good people, and they wouldn't hurt to flee unless you started picking on them.
I'm not
just like
saying all of them are, but if
Oh,
there's
yeah.
just this majority of them that are peaceful, I'm sorry, and their excuse of being afraid, it's not enough. I'm sorry, not in my eyes. It's just not enough. If that was the excuse of our forefathers, we wouldn't have the United States of America today. Those
Yeah, I
people,
agree with
they
you.
were scared and they still fought and formed this country. And you could look at it and say some of the ways that we formed our country might be under dubious circumstances. Like I said, there's bad and good in everything, right? But if we hadn't created this country, imagine what the world would be like today. Imagine all the people around the world who wouldn't have freedoms because our forefathers were the only ones who had any balls to stand up and risk losing everything, and some of them did, including their lives, to create the greatest nation on the earth. We set the example over 200 years ago. And there's just no excuse for anybody. I'm sorry, it's just not in my opinion. I don't have to like you and you don't have to like me, but we don't have to want to kill each other just because we don't agree. But unfortunately, there's enough people in this world that feel that if you don't see it my way, then you should be put to death. Well, those people are a problem.
Yeah, they are.
And one of the things that was going on in World War II was people were thinking about the fanaticism of the Japanese. That's why there were the internment camps. They were not concentration camps. They were not exterminating these people. The worst thing about it was they lost a lot of their property after the war when they were set free, whatever you want to call it. But while they were in these camps, they were allowed to grow gardens. They were allowed to set up organized sports. The kids went to school.
It was a prison. It was a prison.
No, it was not a prison. It was a prison. How do you want to tell me exactly how, if they say, here, take the Jeep and go for a spin, that's being in prison? When you can leave the gates and drive down the street?
If I showed up at your house and took away everything that you owned, including the house, and threw you in a camp somewhere, you would consider it a prison.
Okay. Here's the problem, HVS. Most people look at the internment camps as concentration camps, and they weren't concentration camps. They were exterminating people. The internment camps were the general populace was afraid. I
never said they were.
Well, I hear too many people on gun channels saying that they were the same thing, and they're not. The population of our country at the time was fearful of the Japanese that lived here. Now, you could look at it in 2018 standpoint and go, we were wrong, we were bad. But in 1942, things were different. And unfortunately, these people were put in these internment camps where they were not treated like prisoners. But the thing was, it wasn't the 3 or 4 years out of their life that they lost by being in these camps, because they were allowed freedom in these camps. They were allowed a lot of freedom in these camps. It was the property that they lost when they got out. That's bullshit. Now, they fixed that in the 80s, sort of, fixed it legally by paying all this retribution, whatever. The whole point is, it was a whole different mindset at the time. And the same thing with the Japanese that weren't living here. When we were going to these islands, the Japanese government was telling the civilians that lived on these islands, because some of them had towns and civilian population there with the military, were saying that the American soldiers would torture and rape them and all this other stuff. So they were committing suicide. They were throwing their children off the sides of cliffs and killing their children and then killing themselves to avoid capture by these Americans, because they didn't know us. It was a different time then. We didn't have the internet and all this, international travel and stuff. They didn't know us. They were as foreign to us as we were to them. And in the same regard that we didn't trust the Japanese living here not to be fanatical, they didn't trust us not to do the things that their government, that they've been taught their whole life to believe, would do. And a lot of them killed themselves needlessly. And when it got to where we were going to have to attack the mainland, and we saw how rough the defense of Okinawa was, we said, these people will fight to the last person. They will literally would rather die than surrender. And that's why we used atomic weapons. They didn't know we didn't have a third one. What if they called our bluff and go, no, do it a third time? we would have been screwed. We didn't have enough material to make another atomic bomb for over a year.
Well, we had Operation Downfall. Operation Downfall was already winding up to start. I mean,
right? Because what if the weapons didn't work? What if they didn't surrender? But the thing is, though, what if they had called our bluff? Yeah, we would have had to invade. The other thing is, let's say we didn't use weapons. Let's say they said, "Wow, Trinity was so bad. I know we've got enough material to make 2 weapons, but let's not use them."
After
but we would have had the technology. All right, within what was it, 5 years? The Russians had the same technology. Could you imagine if we had waited till the 1960s to use a nuclear weapon for the first time? As many weapons as there were by that time, and how much more powerful they were. Instead, we used the most minimal nuclear weapons there were to end this terrible war, and they were so scary. Even when people had lots of more powerful weapons, they said, "Screw that! It's a deterrent. We're not going to use them."
I think one of the other deterrents was that Japan, if they had a choice, they didn't want to be if they had a choice of who was going to occupy them, they would rather be occupied by the Americans than the Russians.
I mean, yeah.
No, that wasn't. No,
I've
no,
heard
that was the Germans were thinking that.
Well, I think the Japanese
were
were thinking the same thing. I mean, but okay, so
Russians weren't dropping atomic bombs on them.
They didn't have them,
yeah,
but they had
Stalin either. We weren't murdering his own people, at the same time.
I think that was a long way off of anybody in Japan's radar at the time.
Well, for the people that think that the fact that we use those 2 weapons to end the war makes us evil, I don't think they're looking at the big picture. I really don't. It's awful that those people died, but they would have died anyhow in the invasion.
Mm-hmm. That is true.
And for what it's been almost 75 years now, about, nobody has dared to use a nuclear weapon since. And how many nations have them? And how many more do we have? And how much more powerful are they?
Oh,
Nobody's
God,
used them.
They're like 100 times. They're ridiculously more powerful.
So for the left wingers that are narrow minded, that are out there going how terrible we are and how we learn from our past. Well, we're supposed to. I shouldn't say we do, because sometimes we repeat stuff, right? And I don't just mean America, I mean everybody. But we're supposed to learn from our past. This is a valuable lesson about how dangerous these are and how we can't let anybody else have these and we don't have them. If we had said, "Oh, these things are so terrible, let's just get rid of them," and then 5 years later the Russians had them, could you imagine the world today? So once again, there's all these necessary evils that people just don't get, because they I swear, it's like people need to get out. Quit living in this little box and thinking the world is so perfect and so black and white.
It's a bubble, I think, that people tend to live in.
Well, some people think the
they
earth
don't
is
pay
flat.
attention to school. They don't teach it in school either. They don't read anything. They get all their crap from Facebook and Instagram and everything else.
Yeah, there's another whole thing.
I work with a bunch of kids, and they're some of the dumbest, stupidest idiots on the planet. When the people that are my age that are dead and gone, this planet is seriously screwed, man. I mean, there is not very many.
Let's have some hope for the future,
dude.
Okay.
Yes, I'm telling you, it's bad. It's bad. I mean, it's bad.
Well, teach your children well. Teach your children well.
And Scoob's kids are the ones that are going to have to save us all.
Then we're screwed, because
why?
Kids today, they're just not the same.
No, they're not.
Well, of course
I'm
not.
tough
They never
on my
are.
kids because I don't want them to grow up to be soft. I want them to have survival skills. I want them to be able to, if I die tomorrow, I want to know that they're going to be okay. The problem is all the other influence, the other 99% of the things that are around them that influence them, all tell them to be weak and lazy and stupid. And I don't like it.
And there's a lot of it that tells them to be, I mean, literally stupid. It's amazing how some of these people can. I'm amazed that they can tie their own shoes in the morning sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes it's some people you just remember you can't figure out. I mean, if they're how does their brain, how do they remember to breathe? They're so
How
dumb,
did they
you know.
pass high school? These are guys that just got out of high school and that have been out of high school for a few years and gone to some higher education, but they're totally dumb. I mean, they can't. I mean, they can't do basic stuff.
Well, I think it's because the government is in charge of the education system. So
I mean, hell, they don't even know history. They don't know anything about what we're talking about here. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, what's that? Was that something we dropped
Yeah,
a giant bomb
well,
on?
no. What they do know, what little bit they do know, they judge, and they judge based on current standards because they don't
Yeah.
go and study history as a whole. You can't look at one little sliver of history and go, oh, well, it's this. You have to look at everything that
Yeah,
surrounds it.
it's like slavery. It's like, I mean, yes, slavery is bad. And yes, our country got rid of it. We got rid of it within 1 million nation. But every freaking country and nation on the planet was doing the same damn thing. I mean, it's not like
They
this
don't
was,
want to
hey,
they
just
don't want to
us.
read the next paragraph to see that. They don't want to flip the page to see that. They don't want to do the research on their own and do their own due diligence to see that.
Yeah, I mean, they don't know that. It's just like,
They don't want to
God.
read the manuscripts of the books at the time, or read the laws that were being written at the time, or read some of the letters that are out there in historical
if it doesn't fit
archives.
into a
And what,
meme, unless you can put it into a meme, they're not going to see it, you know.
Correct.
well, what I'm saying is try to put themselves in that mindset. When you go to these museums and places like that, where they wear the clothes and they talk the way those people talk, and when you can go eat the same kind of crappy food they used to eat and everything else, right? Where it's not a damn gift shop and a photo op. And you go into these rickety old wooden buildings on a 95-degree day. It's 140 in the building, and they're saying, and this is what they did every day. And they had to wear long clothes because they didn't want to get sunburned or bit by bugs, or that was just style or modesty or blah blah. And you're looking at stuff. And how did these people live? But a lot of people don't look. They're more interested in the damn gift shop and the photo op instead of going. You mean they had to go into this nasty old thing that looked like a closet and take a dump? Yep. They don't want to know. They just don't want to know. And then if you say, well, if they had to do all this stuff, if they had to go outside and freeze to pump water out of the well to bring it in a bucket, and then they got sick from drinking the water and stuff, maybe it would cause them to do this or act like this or be like this or think this or want to make money this way or want to live here or what. And then you start to think for a while and you start to put yourself in their shoes, and you suddenly realize it's not that these people were wrong. We're judging them by today's standards. You've got to live their life and go, okay, things were different back then. They didn't have the fucking internet. These kids, honestly, if I talk to somebody under the age of maybe 30, I'd say they don't know what it's like not to have the internet or cable TV or things like that. They don't know what carbon paper is. I mean, they don't know how to work a rotary phone. It's just, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
So they don't understand that
yeah.
it wasn't that long ago that we didn't have. If you wanted to do the research, you can go on Google and a couple keystrokes, you've got the information. You would actually have to go to the library when it's open. You couldn't do it like right now at midnight, right? You just go to the library, and then you have to go through books. And even then, the library may not have all the books you want, or there may not be enough research, or the technology wasn't good enough to do the research on the thing.
Well, it's like I think that the issue is that you're talking about is we're as society has as civilization has moved forward, we live in a electronicized, computerized age, and we've grown reliant on these things, and people don't have no experience in how to live without them. Everything is managed. Everything is. You can do anything. You can't do anything without a computer. You can't do it's the entire civilization, including the children and all the people and the government and the companies. They're all reliant on these technologies, which is why if something like a Carrington event happens and the grid goes down, then so many people wouldn't survive because they don't know how to do anything without electricity. They don't know how to do anything without a computer. They don't know how to do anything without a cell phone, and they can't figure it out because it's just not in their realm of experience. And so that's why when you go and look at preppers channels and people that do things that are like outside of the comfort zone that normal people would do, people that do all these, I mean, whether it's bushcrafting outdoors or canning food or reloading your own ammunition, and so a lot of things that I don't do. I mean, because I still have a long way to go as a prepper, if you ask me. It's my hobby. I do the best I can. But at least I have some concept of it helps to know what you don't know. And I think a lot of the people on the planet today just don't know what they don't know. But anyway, but what I wanted to get from Squib, because he's a veteran out of this whole thing, is can you give us, just the random YouTube listener, some kind of description of how god awful being in combat is? I mean, there's no music, there's no drums playing in the background, I guess, unless you have a tape. It just, it's not done to a soundtrack. There's no director. Francis Ford Coppola isn't telling you to move in front of the camera and keep moving and pretend, don't look at the camera. If the grid goes down, it won't be fun. If you want to join the army or the military to be in combat, you're insane. If you have principles that you believe are worth fighting for, that I can understand. There isn't another country that has all these freedoms that were written down, where it's what the government can do to the people. They don't have these freedoms written down in other countries. And so that's what's worth fighting for. We can call it liberty, or you can just say America, but it's not blind nationalism. And it's anyway. I don't know if that's something anybody can share with somebody who has no idea of what. I've said what I've said in past shows is like what war is people who would get along just fine with each other if they met at a coffee shop or a restaurant, or were standing in line at a movie theater or at the beach, except they're wearing different uniforms, so they've been ordered to kill each other in an organized manner, an organized military manner. And it's just people killing each other because they're wearing different uniforms. And
no, that's not what it's about at all.
Well, you tell me.
You go because your country sends you. You don't go for apple pie mom and all that stuff. When you're fighting for your buddies next to you. You might be an American and you're trying to fight for freedom and peace and that sort of thing, but you're fighting for your buddy next to you. But as far as like where we were deployed, the people that we were messing with or messing with us or whatever you want to call it, they were animals. They were animals. Maybe given enough time, enough freedom, enough education, and enough hope, they could get older, get wiser, and change, especially if some of their leaders were removed and they were given the opportunity to think for themselves. But then there's some you'll never change. And you also can't hope that all the bad guys that are in charge leave and that somebody comes in there and gives these people an opportunity to change, because some people, when they're younger, they're hot-headed, idealistic, that sort of thing. It's a lot easier to get them to go die as a martyr and everything else. But if they live long enough and raise kids of their own and live some life and get some education and get out and see things and see that what they've grown up around is not the only thing out there, they might think for themselves and say, no, this isn't worth fighting for. But the people that we were dealing with were animals. They were killing people because they didn't believe the same religion as them. They were killing people because there's just nothing else to do that day. They were slaughtering people. They were raping. They were pillaging. They were animals. And I'm not going to give them 10 or 20 or 30 years to hope that they change. I'm going to put down that animal right now. And somebody can say, well, you're an animal too. Well, I guess you got to be an animal to deal with it. The only thing is, I wasn't killing and raping and robbing, and we were going in to take care of these people. We weren't going in to start this. We weren't doing this. They were, and they had been doing it. And maybe some people could say we need to butt out of other countries' business. And to some extent, sometimes I think we do. But then there's other times where it's like you got to look at the big picture. I definitely don't want an American to die on a foreign shore for some piece of crap that's just going to raise a kid that 20 years later is going to try to bomb us, right? But the people that we've fought, I don't want to say most of the time, but I definitely don't want to say just some of the time, have been animals. And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunately that they didn't get to grow up like us, where they had more free will to make decisions on their own.
I just want to say that in every war, everyone dehumanizes the enemy to a certain extent. In the United States, we had all those cartoonish pictures of Japanese soldiers wearing those fishbowl glasses, and in the end, it was stupid because the Japanese army could fight. They weren't incompetent, subhuman. They weren't what was portrayed in the American popular media as. They were an effective fighting army. And the worst thing you can do in a combat situation is underestimate your enemy. At least that's my opinion. But you're the veteran, not me. Tell me if I'm wrong.
Well, I know my friend Kevin, one of his grandfathers was in the Pacific, and he pretty much what my friend Kevin has told me about what his grandfather told him was pretty much what Squib told you. But I mean, my grandparents weren't on that side in the Pacific; they were in the European theater, so I didn't have any family members over there. But not all the Japanese were kind-hearted individuals, and some of those guys were pretty brutal and pretty nasty. I mean, there was a lot of. I mean, I've also read that medical unit that did all the testing and experimenting on the Chinese.
Oh yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, that
Patrick, you got to think about how many tens of thousands of young Japanese kids were on these islands that they had never been on before, far away from home. And they come from some small town, some small village, some farming community, whatever it is. They don't know anything about Americans. They just know that their government is right, or they've been told all their life the government is right, that they're the superior people, and that they've got to protect this as the homeland, and you should die for your emperor if you want to, otherwise you're going to dishonor your family. And they don't know any better. It's not that the Japanese that we were fighting on these islands had hate in their heart that wasn't created by their government, by their leaders, by their military. They didn't know any better. And you could say, oh, we were wrong for killing all these people that just didn't know any better. That's what happens in war sometimes. Sometimes you think these guys who take these kids, these teenage or early 20 kids, and brainwash them and get them to strap a bomb vest on them and get into a bus and kill everybody on the bus, do you think these kids knew any better? They didn't. And
No.
it's unfortunate,
No,
but those are the people that die in war. It even happens on our side to some extent. They take you when you're young, partly because of your physical conditioning, but also partly because it's easier to break you down and build you up. But if you're going to sit there and go, well, we just won't fight anybody that we think is brainwashing their young population into become a bunch of militant assholes, then we'd be taken over ourselves one day. It just doesn't. War is not pretty. It just isn't. For the people who want to doctor it up, put some perfume on it, make it smell better, it just isn't.
Yeah, I would have to say that it sucks pretty bad. So why do you think people like watching war movies all the time if war is so ugly?
Because it's in our nature. It's in our nature. We've got a violent streak in our nature. We just do. And war and combat and murder and all kinds of death and fighting and physical and weapons and it have been in our history since before there was written history, right? You can have somebody who will go to a peace march, but then they'll go watch Platoon. It's like, oh, wait, what? It's just who we are. Everybody's got something inside of them that's ugly. Some people never let it out, and then other people do. And there's a controlled way to let it out, like when you're in a life or death struggle on some beach fighting somebody hand to hand because you're all out of ammunition, and that's where you let that out. What you don't do is you don't let it out when you go and do some things that'll get you put in jail forever. And that's the difference between us and animals. Is animals can't control their instincts. Human beings can. And some people just go with this and they take it too far. And those are the people that are mass murderers and all these other things. But there is a way to channel that ugly when you're in a life or death struggle. And it's something where you got to do it and think about it later. Because if you stop to think about it, that part of us that isn't an animal, that can control our instincts, that likes these war movies and likes these weapons and likes fighting but acts on the outside, they're just the nicest, peaceful, most bullshit. All right? That part of you, if you stop to think about what you're doing, that part of you is supposed to stop you. Or it's supposed to make you break down and cry and lose control and everything else. That's why you got to process it later.
So kill everybody and let God sort it out.
Well, somebody could say there's a fine line between a soldier and a murderer, but I say no. A soldier fights for a reason, and he fights only when he has to, or she. A murderer kills for pleasure.
Or profit.
It's a big difference. It's a big difference. A murderer doesn't stop those instincts. A soldier can. Because a soldier's more of a human being. A murderer is an animal.
I'm trying to think of an intelligent question to ask at this point, and I'm not sure I can.
Well, I mean, August 6th is about the first time a nuclear weapon was deployed in combat. And I'm sure it shocked everybody. It shocked everybody who found out about it. And then the fact that we had to do it again. But by doing it again, it showed everybody we meant business.
Well, it showed everybody that we had a technology that we could replicate and
deliver.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things we talked about when we've talked about the whole North Korea threat is I just don't feel they have even if they've got weapons, I don't feel they have a credible delivery system yet. So
Right.
we've had a credible delivery system since 1945.
Yeah, we haven't used it, and
But
so
it's been a deterrent. Our missiles and our bombers.
well, there's still been a lot of conventional warfare where none of those bombs or missiles did us any good.
Well, the missiles and bombs, the way they do us good is by us not getting into a nuclear war. If you use one nuclear weapon tactically, it would be a big mistake. It would be.
Yeah. I mean, they kept the peace for
chain
50
reaction.
years with the two biggest kids on the block. I mean, they never.
Right. Well, the two biggest kids on the block had a lot to lose. Some of the players that are trying to get nuclear weapons now, it's like, look at what's happening with Iran. They're on the verge. I mean, their economy's cratering. Their currency is worth nothing. Their people are protesting in the streets, even knowing that they can be killed by the military for doing it. And their economy is not functioning because we're like at midnight. We're going to and basically use something similar to what we did with Japan. We're not freezing their money. We're just saying that anybody that does business that buys Iranian oil, we can't bank in the U.S., can't do business in the U.S. And so that's all Iran has for an economy is selling oil. So if they can't sell oil, their whole economy and country grinds to a halt. And I think their people are pretty much sick. I mean, it's not a democracy over there, even though they have fake elections. But I know their people are sick of taking all the country's wealth and spending it on military adventures in Syria or Lebanon, or giving the Hamas, shipping rockets to the Hamas to shoot at Israel. It just, I think they just want to have a regular country again, and they don't.
They did have a regular country,
Mm-hmm.
and they overthrew it. They didn't like the Shah, and they could say all these bad things about the Shah, but really, was he really worse than the Ayatollah? Come on.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but I'd rather live under the Shah than the Ayatollah Khomeini. That's for damn sure.
But these people,
he may not be a nice guy, but he ain't the other guy.
And the thing is, look, America is not trying to turn every country in the world into America. We're trying to say, you have your own land, you're your own country, your own sovereign, this. You can be our friend or you can be our enemy. If you're our friend, you'll benefit. If you're our enemy, you might suffer one day. The choice is yours. But we're not going into any country going, wave the flag, apple pie, and baseball. We're not doing that. Now, sometimes I really wish some of these countries would do stuff like, build Disneyland, get cable TV, and fast food restaurants. And they go, what the fuck are we bombing these other countries for? Let's just stay here and get fat, dumb, and nasty like the Americans. This isn't too bad. But no, instead they are on a holy war or whatever the heck it is. We're not trying to tell Iran you can't be Muslim anymore, or you can't, we're trying to take away their territory or anything, or their identity. All we're trying to say is, look, knock off the nuclear bullshit because we know you don't need alternate energy. Stop supporting terrorists and stop threatening your neighbors and commerce in the Persian Gulf. And then guess what we'll do? We'll be friends with you again, because we always do it with every country. Every country we go to war with, every country we have sanctions against, at some point down the road, we end up making friends with them again. We might go to war with them again, but we make friends with them. And then we would end up buying oil from Iran and selling them weapons and maybe building a McDonald's there.
I won't get into the McDonald's part of it. Ask somebody in France, they call it McDo's in France. I remember when they actually blew up a McDonald's in France because it represented some far right group, not farther right than Le Pen. They dynamited a McDonald's and killed a few people and then their point they were trying to make was that McDonald's had reduced the person to a human being to a consumer unit, and they didn't like that, so they blew up a McDonald's, which really pissed me off. But the French people don't. It's like they're upset that there's like a McDonald's on the Champs-Elysees. And like, well, people like eating there, don't they? And it's like, yeah, but it's like not French culture, and it's like, okay, but I guess they're French. We tolerate
it's not
it.
French culture, Jesus! They got French fries for crying out loud.
Yeah, but they don't call them French fries. They call them frites. They're frites.
Just go into any French restaurant, order anything off the menu, and ask for ketchup, and see how the waiter looks at you. I promise you. You know.
The only thing I could read on the menu was spaghetti, and when I told the guy I wanted spaghetti, he said spaghetti clams or spaghetti tomato or something, right? And I know that's an Italian accent, but that's sort of the way the French guy talked. And I'm like, with the tomato, I'm like, what the fuck would you have clams with a spaghetti noodle? Whatever.
Well, don't ask me. I only know how to say dirty things in French. Okay, so
yeah, me too. So like the guys from Pulp Fiction, I have had a Royale cheese. It's not a Royale with cheese, it's a Royale cheese. But I never questioned why. I just figured that's what they called it. And then later I'm seeing the movie and going, oh yeah, they do have the metric system over there. Huh.
Well, you know, when my dad was in Jerusalem, when I was there, he went all over Jerusalem trying to find a can of Spam. It wasn't easy, but he finally found one.
We went to Pizza Hut in Turkey, and we went to Burger King in Spain, and we went to McDonald's in France because we were looking for American food. We didn't want this foreign garbage.
My dad stole the towel from the Holy Land Hotel in Jerusalem.
Well, he'll burn in hell for that.
No, I doubt that.
Foie gras, squib.
What's that?
You didn't want foie gras or whatever they call it? Or escargot?
Escargot? No.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew fromage was cheese, but I could be like Clark Griswold. Let's translate souffle. What do you know? Souffle.
Well, I just want to say that the Japanese army had good soldiers, and even though when they were going down the Malay Peninsula to conquer Singapore, that was basically 30,000 Japanese soldiers on bicycles. First, they overran Kuala Lumpur.
Here you go with the damn bicycle thing again.
Well, you seem to be against bicycles, and 30,000 Japanese troops conquered Kuala Lumpur, and when they weren't marching to the jungle, they were riding on roads on bicycles, and all they needed was the rifle, a bag of rice, and a bicycle, and I guess an extra inner tube. But when they got to Singapore, there was 100,000 British soldiers in Singapore, and they were defeated by 30,000 Japanese soldiers. One of the problems was that the guns in Singapore were pointed out toward the ocean, and the attack came from the land. I mean, the Japanese had superior air power. They could bomb Singapore all day and night, and Britain couldn't do anything about it. They sent 2 battleships, and they were bombed by Japanese bombers and sunk. So Singapore surrendered to 30,000 Japanese on bicycles. So there you go.
You can ride into combat with a rifle, a bag of rice, and a bicycle. I'm going to fly into battle.
I'm just trying to get you to Dusty's
with an
house.
Alice Pack, MREs.
You don't have a helicopter. I'm trying to get you to Dusty's farm.
I'm working on it. As a matter of fact, let me go look and see how much one will cost. Hold on.
A bicycle or a helicopter?
If you can look at tanks, I'm going to look at helicopters.
Wait, I just want to know, are you buying a helicopter or a bicycle? Because I know you can afford a bicycle.
He's gonna buy a Huey. He's gonna buy a
Huey.
dual engine, the Super Huey, one that's got all the fancy bells and whistles on it, and the crazy looking nose and.
Okay, I was listening to some prepper's YouTube channel, and they were telling me that one way you could EMP proof your car is by some kind of copper lining and stuff in the hood. Do you know anything about that?
If your engine computer is in there, but yeah, basically the easiest way of doing it would be just wrap the engine computer with your foil or copper or whatever it is, and wrap all your control modules, and you're fine. I mean,
Yeah, but he has to use
sensors.
his car on a regular basis, so he can't just leave it like that.
Right, but you can take the computer out of where it's housed at, which is what usually is called an e-box, and you can just wrap it in that. I mean,
he's not going to do that every day, and just in case there's an EMP.
Well, I mean, look, honestly, EMP comes around here, it's going to be lights out. I don't care.
And they were talking today on the news about the cyber attacks, the cyber threats from
taking these people that put this stuff on YouTube.
This wasn't YouTube.
I know. I'm just using YouTube as an example. I really wanted to actually EMP that damn thing and say it works or it doesn't work. Or I want to see you become Tom Cruise and throw a solenoid in an old Chrysler minivan and get it running. I mean, it's not going to work.
Well, can I say something? Jeez, I'm just the story on today's Business Channel was the threat of cyber attacks against the electric grid, and the electric companies are basically asking the military for help because they're not prepared to defend themselves from a cyber attack. And basically there have been reconnaissance hacks into the electric grid by Iran and Russia, just to get control. So if they can just shut down the electric grid, that means no 911 response, no cell phones, no rule of law, no security, no banking, no economy, no nothing, and just from a cyber attack.
Mm-hmm.
So, taking out the electric grid, and we have very little defense because this isn't a government system; it's a utility, and utilities don't have the resources to fight a state actor, like Russia has a cyber army. They can, if they want to take out a utility company and take over, they probably can, and so that's something they're working on. So right now it's a possible threat. I mean, if a country like Russia or Iran is going to do something like that, that won't be the only thing they'll do. That'll be step 4 out of 12 bad things that will happen. But it'll be a big one. And so it's just, when we were talking before about people not knowing how to do anything without electricity or being able to survive without electricity, it's just people haven't lived that way for so long. When the Carrington event happened and there was a big EMP, it just melted the telegraph wires caught on fire, because that's all there was electrically back then in 1800 and whatever year that happened. And so if something like that happens now, when we're so dependent on electronics and internet, then the casualty toll would be so much higher.
And then how long would it actually still last for? I mean, would it last for days or weeks or months? That's because, I mean, the Pentagon knows. I mean, they do have people, like you said, they asked for the military's help and all that, figuring out how to protect.
But let's just imagine the military trying to help every electronic utility in the United States. That's a huge job that they just can't say, okay, we'll do that. No, it's not going to happen like that. It's a vulnerability.
Well, that, and having the grid system, the way it's set up. I mean, it's kind of, when those rolling blackouts have to happen in California because there's not enough power, or you have one
Yeah, they call
power
it
plant
brownouts.
goes down. You have one power plant goes down in New York or Canada, and the whole East Coast shuts down.
Canada's having all kinds of problems with Saudi Arabia. I guess Saudi Arabia told their ambassador to get the frick out because some people in Canada didn't like their they arrested some women's rights activists in Saudi Arabia, so they wound up throwing it. But anyway, let's talk about a gun thing. Diane, I talked about this on Edge's show on Friday. I don't know if anybody heard it, but Dianne Feinstein has had a Chinese spy working in her office for 20 years. Well, and she's like on the intelligence committee. She was the head of the intelligence committee for a while, and for 20 years, her driver is a Chinese spy.
And I'm sure he still gets his government benefits.
Yeah, it's
He's
just
not arrested,
amazing.
he's not in jail. He's not doing time. He's not locked up.
Apparently, he was an unwitting spy or something like that.
Oh,
I don't know.
yeah.
How can you be an unwitting spy for 20 years?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I know that people are dumb in San Francisco, but all right. I think I need to switch to some mindless volcano video because I haven't even seen the last volcano video. Let me see if I can put it up from the helicopter real quick. All right.
$250,000 for a helicopter.
What a Huey?
No, Bell 222.
Why don't you how much for an ultralight, dude? You can go gyro captain on us.
Nah, that's Murdoch. Or John Denver.
No. If I've got lottery money and I can get a helicopter, I'm getting a Bell 222.
Oh, you're waiting for your wife's lottery tickets to pay off. All right. Well, let's see. Can you guys see this? Let's wait for it to start playing.
We'll win off the lottery before you get rich off Bitcoin.
Well, Digibyte, I've done some math since you dropped the B bomb, and since I have about 2,557 Digibyte coins, if Digibyte hits $100,000 a coin, then I can buy that estate with the infinity pool on the bluff over Secrets Beach for 70 million, and still have enough money to throw a party left. Basically, I'd have about another $170 million left.
Remember what happened last time you threw a party?
The last time I threw a party was in Malibu, and the police came.
With the dry ice and the police. So
Yeah.
I'm not coming to any of your parties, man.
Well, you're going to miss a hell of a party because for $170 million, I could throw a wild-ass party, dude. Can you see this video?
It was a great party, but could you bail me out of jail the next day?
I'll call Doc the bounty hunter, decline bail bonds. All right, can you see this video?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is Fissure 8 lava flow from a helicopter overhead. I haven't seen any of this video yet, so I don't know what's in it, but so let's see. I've been what have I been watching? I've been watching The Last Alone. I think somebody else tapped out. I think they're down to 4 people left. It's only been like 33 days. You should have gone on that show. If you managed to not starve to death or be eaten by a bear, you'd be really close to making 500 large. And the Yellowstone live show on Nat Geo Wild has a super volcano, 30-mile wild caldera, and let's see. I saw some really good African safari lives. Safari Brothers. All right, so we're going to finish the show off with some gratuitous volcanic lava video here in the Big Island. See, why would anybody bother to nuke this island? There's nothing here. I mean, the volcano is nuking itself. We don't need any help.
Yeah, the volcano will do it for you.
Yeah. That's where I used to live, right around there. When I first moved here. Oh, it looks like the boat ramp is still up as of yesterday. It's close to the boat ramp, but it hasn't taken the Pohiki boat ramp at Isaac Haley Beach Park yet. So it's Pohiki and Kapoho. And there you go. That's the latest video from Paradise Helicopters. Get back to this. All right, so anybody has any other final thoughts on prepping for, I don't know, just how bad war sucks, or, I mean, the best part about war is when it's over and peace is restored and people can, goodwill among mankind returns, and there's no, people don't have to follow orders to kill each other anymore. Your orders are to be the best human being you can, survive whatever life throws at you, and I guess treat your fellow man as you want them to treat you. All right, and always stockpile your ammo, of course, just in case everything goes south. This is Hawaii Volcano Squad. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Stay safe out there. These proceedings are closed.
Bye-bye.
That was gentlemen.